So, namaskar everyone, and wishing you all a very pleasant evening. On behalf of the Indian Achievers Forum, this is your host Vimmi Choudhary extending greetings to all of you into yet another exclusive webinar being brought to you by IF, which is part of the dialogue series which we are organizing, discussing on some of the key and very important sectors impacting the economic and social health of our country. Last we had on the banking and the insurance sector, and this time our focus is on the education sector, a sector that in fact has a responsibility of raising future ready think tanks, future ready professionals, effective hands and minds, responsive and responsible citizens for the country. And if you see, this is a sector that is a social process with a social and economic function and relevance. And within this sector, today our major focus is going to be on the new education policy that aims to make our present education system at par with that of the global world. An education system that is for the present aspirational India and Indians. Indians who want jobs, who want a good quality life, who feel handicapped when they enter the real world, facing the huge gap in what is being taught and what is being applied. And as a result, as we can see, there's an army of graduate, unemployed, frustrated youth. And needless to say that this has added to our inefficiency, to our underproductivity, to the poor quality, to the frustration and dilemma. And even after 70 years of independence, we are still living in that tag of being a developing country and experiencing huge brain drain. So now we have this new education policy that promises to be truly transformative in nature, aiming to nurture and harness our biggest national asset, that is our brain power, our huge manpower, effectively mobilizing it, applying it, and ensuring a more quality future for our youth and shaping a 21st century India. NEP has been cleared by the cabinet, and this is the third major revamp which we are seeing in the educational framework of our country. We had it in 68, then 86, and now after almost 3 decades, we are having a rethink and a relook on our education system. So, the very objective of our today's webinar is that we have think tanks, we have people who have been involved with this policy, the policy makers who are going to be further taking it to the implementation stage. So, with all of them, we are going to be analyzing NEP 2020, the best of the minds, experienced minds talking to us, and having it on a very important day, this webinar. And you must be knowing that since 2008, November 11th is being celebrated as the Education Day to commemorate the birth anniversary of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, the first education minister of independent India. So, having it on this very important day, the App Day, our discussions, our deliberations also become all the more very relevant, important, and a responsible thinking is going to be extended by our speakers. But before we open the floor, rather the screen to our discussions, we have our former Minister of HRD, who's presently the Minister for the Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Shri Prakash Javadekar ji. There's a message from him, and so let's hear from him what are his views on NEP.
इसमें पहले तो अर्ली चाइल्डहुड के अमित गोयनका उनके साथी इस परिचर्चा में, राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति के परिचर्चा में भाग लेने वाले सभी मान्यवर और उपस्थित भाइयों बहनों, चौंतीस साल के बाद नई शिक्षा नीति आई है। हमारे देश में शिक्षा का प्रसार तो हुआ, लेकिन देश को उचित शिक्षा मिलने के लिए बहुत काम करना बाकी था। इसलिए जो नई शिक्षा नीति आई, बहुत चर्चा विमर्श करके आई। स्मृति ईरानी थी, मंत्री तब ग्राम पंचायत से लेकर, स्कूल से लेकर कॉलेज तक, तहसील से लेकर जिले से लेकर राज्यों तक सभी संबंधित लोगों से चर्चा हुई। मैं जब मंत्री था तब हमने कस्तूरीरंगन कमेटी की नियुक्ति की और मैं मंत्री वहां से दूसरी जगह आया तब के पहले उन्होंने मुझे वो रिपोर्ट सौंपी। अभी जो मंत्री है निशंक जी, उनके समय में उस पर संस्कार हुए और कंसल्टेशन हुआ और उसके बाद ये शिक्षा नीति आई है, मोस्ट डेमोक्रेटिक प्रोसेस एडॉप्टेड इन द वर्ल्ड, क्योंकि ये हर घर का सवाल है। कभी कभी लोग शिक्षा पर बहुत बोलते हैं, लेकिन मेरा तो ये मानना है कि शिक्षा जब तक, अच्छी शिक्षा, मैंने नारा दिया था सबको शिक्षा, अच्छी शिक्षा, क्वालिटी एजुकेशन टू ऑल, लेकिन ये जब तक चुनाव का मुद्दा नहीं बनता तब तक शिक्षा का सुधार नहीं होता। मुझे विश्वास है एक दिन बनेगा, लेकिन तब तक अभी जो पॉलिसी आई है वो बहुत क्रांतिकारी है। इसमें पहले तो अर्ली चाइल्डहुड केयर एंड एजुकेशन है, तीसरे वर्ष से लेकर 8वें वर्ष तक किताबें और फॉर्मल एजुकेशन नहीं, इनफॉर्मल एजुकेशन, फंडामेंटल लिटरेसी और कंप्यूटर न्यूमरेसी, उसकी पहचान हो और कॉग्निटिव स्किल्स का विकास हो, ये उसका अर्थ है। और इसलिए आंगनवाड़ी है, अब आंगनवाड़ी एक तरह से स्कूल का हिस्सा बन जाएगा। आंगनवाड़ी सेविकाओं को भी अच्छा ट्रेनिंग दिया जाएगा, वो और सार्थक तरीके से बच्चों के साथ काम कर सकती है। वही समय है जब बच्चा सीखता है ज्यादा से ज्यादा। उसके साथ साथ तीसरी से 5वीं तक, छठी से 8वीं तक, 9वीं से 12वीं तक अलग अलग क्रम में शिक्षा होती जाएगी। बेसिक ज्ञान मिलेगा, थोड़ा ज्यादा ज्ञान मिलेगा, फिर फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी भी होगी, विषयों का चयन भी हो सकता है और तकनीकी शिक्षा भी आ सकती है, प्रोफेशनल एजुकेशन भी आ सकता है 11वीं 12वीं के समय। तो ये सब क्वालिटीज का विकास होगा। कॉलेजेस में तो नई फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी मिलेगी, इंजीनियरिंग भी करेगा, म्यूजिक भी करेगा, तो क्या दोनों साथ साथ क्यों नहीं हो सकते? कॉलेजेस को और विश्वविद्यालयों को ज्यादा से ज्यादा गुणों के आधार पर ऑटोनॉमी मिलेगी। शोध और अनुसंधान पर ज्यादा जोर रहेगा, क्योंकि देश तभी आगे बढ़ता है जब शोध होता है, और हम वी लैक इन इनोवेशन। वो इनोवेशन बढ़ाने के लिए जो भी प्रयास करने हैं, उसी का ये प्रमुख सूत्र है इस शिक्षा नीति के। पेरेंट्स की भी सहभाग है, समाज का भी सहभाग है। शिक्षा देश का सबसे मुख्य कार्यक्रम है और उसके लिए सब साधनों की कम न रहे, ये भी ये नई नीति देखती है। मुझे लगता है आज आप नई नीति पर विचार करके अच्छा चर्चा करोगे। जो भी आपका जिस तैयार होगा वो मुझे भेजे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
तो माननीय मंत्री जी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करना चाहेंगे उनके विचारों के लिए और हमें जो नई शिक्षा नीति है उसके बारे में जानकारी देने के लिए। And ladies and gentlemen, as you heard, as the Honorable Minister said, that this is a very well thought of, well ideated, a much discussed and deliberated. As he said, most democratic process was adopted in formalizing this policy, a well conceived, a well conceptualized policy. And then the government also stands open to the suggestions, any recommendations on how to take it forward, to implement it in letter and spirit. And thus, again, I would like to reiterate that our discussions hold a lot of importance today, a lot of responsibility for these discussions. The outcome of that is going to be shared with the ministry. Before moving ahead, now we would like to invite the views of, in fact, we have a video message from Padma Vibhushan, Dr. Kasturirangan ji, the mind behind the new education policy, the chairman of the drafting committee of NEP 2020, the former chairman ISRO, the former chancellor JNDU. So what he has to say about the policy, drafting it, the thought and the idea which has been behind it. Let's listen in to Dr. Kasturirangan ji.
I am delighted to be invited to speak at the National E-Summit on National Education Policy. I would like to particularly express my grateful thanks to Sri Amit Goyenka, Chairman of the Indian Achievers Forum and CSR Times for this privilege. I'm extremely happy to share this forum with Chief Guest Honorable Sri Sanjay Dhotreji, Minister of State for Education, with whom I had several interesting interactions on various aspects of NEP 2020. It's also nice to see the presence of Sri KJ Alfonso ji, whom we had the privilege of having as a member of the drafting committee, but who had to drop out in between because of his overriding political commitments. In the short period in which I had the privilege of working with Sri Alfonso ji, he gave the committee the benefit of his deep insights on several aspects of school education, many of which have found their way into the policy itself. I note the presence of Dr. Suresh Prabhuji, a long-term colleague and friend of mine, with whom I had worked in the formulation of the national water policy, and later on, as member of Rajya Sabha, shared several moments of interesting debate and deliberations on various issues of national significance. There are many other eminent guests of honor and distinguished personalities among this gathering today, all of whom I would like to greet on this august occasion. India, over the next decade, will have the highest population of young people in the world, more than 50% below 35 years of age, aspiring for high quality education. The policy envisages several transformative changes in our education system, which, among other things, is based on the developments on the scientific and technological front, new demands of knowledge placed by the societal changes, job scenario, aligning with new global orders, besides addressing the unfinished agendas from the earlier policies while being rooted to India's value system and ethos. I shall, in the next few minutes, focus the related aspects of the policy at the level of school education, undergraduate education, postgraduate education and research, professional and vocational education, besides matters of lifelong education. The policy has carefully examined the aspects of early childhood care and education and has come to the conclusion that we need to effect transformative changes in the way the current school education is conducted. Based on the present scientific understanding, 85% of a child's cumulative brain development occurs before the age of 8. It is in this period that the complex process of child development proceeds at an extraordinary pace on all dimensions which are intimately related: the biological and physical dimension, the cognitive dimension, and the social and emotional dimension. In the contemporary times, advances in the developmental, cognitive, and educational psychology have considerably influenced our thinking about how we need to address the teaching learning processes of the youngsters in their early childhood. Thus, we have recommended a change from the 10 plus 2 design to an expanded 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 structure duly recognizing the child's learning trajectory from birth to the secondary school. Between the ages 3 to 14, children gradually transition from perceptual learning to conceptual learning and then on to the prescriptive learning and abstraction. The distinction between curricular and extracurricular and co-curricular, art and science and vocational subjects are done away with. In other words, the education at this stage is holistic. I truly believe that our success in these early childhood years could be one of the most powerful forces for the improvement of the well-being of our society. The final secondary level, that is the 4 year stage from ages 14 to 15 to 18, is when students can explore their interests and strengths. The policy calls for exposure to higher educational education at this stage so that the students are fully prepared to decide at the end of 15 years whether they will pursue higher education or vocational education. The transformative aspects of school education in this policy will certainly pose challenges in its implementation, but well within our capability. The policy recognizes the learning crisis in language and mathematics during the primary school years and its impact on attendance, retention, and later learning. A large proportion of students currently in elementary school, estimated to be 5 crores in number, have not attained foundational literacy and numeracy. Every student must attain foundational literacy and numeracy, the very basis of all subsequent learning for children. The policy has a comprehensive approach ranging from on the ground programs to teacher training and committed set of volunteers to support teachers so as to ensure that all children are able to read and write and do mathematics at age appropriate levels within the next 5 years. This is absolutely critical because if this basic deficit is not addressed, then millions of our children do not benefit from education any further. Considering the crucial nature of this recommendation, there is already a proposal to convert this important task into a national mission. Coming to higher education, the policy aims to promote holistic and multidisciplinary education at the undergraduate level to generate more imagination and creativity in the student to ensure their all-rounded development. This holistic nature of education, also called as liberal education, is a part of India's rich legacy and considers a person as truly educated when one has mastered all the 64 kalas as mentioned in the ancient Indian texts. These kalas here encompass music, dance, painting, sculpture, languages, and literature, in addition to subjects such as science, engineering, and mathematics, as well as vocational subjects. Our present system looks to achieve mastery in only one or a few silos, and a short sighted policy would simply have called for improving job readiness on day one. This policy recognizes that such an approach is dangerously out of step with a world that is rapidly changing. It recognizes that students must be given a much broader interdisciplinary foundation so that they can adopt and reinvent themselves as necessary. I want to stress that a comprehensive liberal education develops all capacities, not just intellectual, but aesthetic, social, physical, emotional, and moral capacities in an integrated manner. It is therefore obvious that to lead India into the 21st century and the fourth industrial revolution, multidisciplinary education is central. Even engineering schools such as the IITs will move towards more holistic multidisciplinary education with more arts and humanities, while arts and humanities students will aim to learn more science, while all will make an effort to incorporate more vocational subjects or soft skills. Undergraduate degree will be either 3 or 4 year duration with multiple exit options within this period with appropriate certifications. The 4 year multidisciplinary bachelor program provides opportunity to experience the full range of holistic and multidisciplinary education with focus on chosen major and minor as per the choice of the student. This policy takes the firm view that vocational education must be integrated with undergraduate education. Not only is this consistent with the principles of holistic development, but it gives students an avenue into the world of work that will be increasingly important in the 21st century. I want to clearly emphasize this point because we tend to have a very narrow conception of vocational education and we therefore undervalue it. With advances in technology such as AI and augmented reality, we clearly foresee an increasing number of hybrid jobs where a human's vocational skills will complement the capabilities of high-tech equipment. The higher education system is therefore necessary to prepare students for such jobs. Vocational education will thus become an integral part of the larger vision of liberal education. Taking the strategy further towards integrating professional education with general education, the policy aims to take a holistic approach to the preparation of professionals by ensuring broad based competencies, an understanding of the social human context, a strong ethical compass, in addition to highest quality professional capacities. Thus, it is envisaged all institutions offering either professional or general education must organically evolve into multidisciplinary institutions offering both by 2030. In a nutshell, the overall higher education sector will aim to be an integrated higher education system, including professional and vocational education. Additionally, the policy calls for a complete overhaul of our teacher education system, which is one of the crucial connections between the higher education and school education. As envisaged in the policy, school teacher education being made a part of the higher educational institutions immediately not only raises the stature of school teachers by placing their profession at par with other options for graduates, but it also recognizes that only the higher education system can provide school teachers with a knowledge base broad enough and deep enough to strengthen our schooling systems. Moving towards a multidisciplinary holistic system at undergraduate level would certainly call for a new work culture, institutional mechanisms, besides recasting curricular and pedagogical content. As India aspires to grow and sustain a large and vibrant economy and uplifting its society, one of the key elements to its successful realization is to have a robust ecosystem of research and innovation. The present inadequacies in this context are very much evident through the low number of researchers in India per lakh of population, which is only 15, with all its attendant impacts on publications, patent applications, and industrial growth involving indigenous technologies. The policy also highlights the critical need to better manage research at all levels: pure research, applied research, translational research, and research to address specific needs of industry, social problems, strategic demands, and many such requirements. In order to seed, nurture, and grow and transform universities into full fledged research centers of excellence, the NEP 2020 has recommended the creation of National Research Foundation. The National Research Foundation's primary role will be to nurture a vibrant research ecosystem through adequate funding, mentoring, and careful monitoring. The funding support from the National Research Foundation will be available both to both publicly and privately funded institutions without any distinction. NRF will support multidisciplinary research in the arts and humanities, social sciences, sciences and mathematics, engineering and technology, including educational technology. The policy has paid special attention to the promotion of Indian languages, arts, and culture at the national and individual level. Language, of course, is inextricably linked to art and culture and is the key to preserve and promote culture. Unfortunately, the Indian languages have not received their due attention and care with the country, losing 220 languages in the last 50 years. Further, even those languages of India not officially on endangered list, such as the 22 languages of the 8th schedule, are facing difficulties. The policy therefore recommends learning and teaching of Indian languages by integrating with school and higher education. One of the main thrusts of this policy on higher education is the end of fragmentation. By transforming higher educational institutions into large multidisciplinary universities, colleges, and higher educational institution clusters to knowledge hub, each with at least 3,000 or more students. The idea is to develop and build vibrant communities of schools and scholars and peers, break down silos, harmful silos, and enable students to become well-rounded across disciplines, including artistic, creative, and analytical subjects. Further, this results in increasing resource efficiency, both material and human, across higher education. The definition of a university will allow a spectrum of institutions that range from those that place equal emphasis on teaching and research, that is, research intensive universities, those that place greater emphasis on teaching but still conduct significant research, that is, teaching intensive universities, and at third level, autonomous degree granting colleges, referring to a large multidisciplinary institutions of higher learning that grant undergraduate degree. All higher educational institutions in the next 15 years will become autonomous, self-governing entities through a system of graded accreditation and graded autonomy. The appropriate graded accreditation, such as institutions, shall establish a board of governors consisting of highly qualified and competent individuals with proven capabilities and a strong sense of commitment. The policy addresses the issues of equity and inclusion to achieve an education system where children have equal opportunity to learn and thrive, and so that participation and learning outcomes are equalized across all genders and social categories by 2030. Quality follows equity and inclusion. In other words, the policy commits to ensuring equity and inclusion, which will also drive the transformation of quality of the entire system. Some may find this principle puzzling, but it should not be. The world over, the clear experience of research is that quality will happen if equity is made to happen, but not vice versa. So, to ensure equity and inclusion, the policy has a range of measures focused on specific socio-economically disadvantaged groups, such as large segments of population and geographies that are disadvantaged. The policy encourages the participation of private sector, especially the private philanthropic sector, to provide quality education, since over 40% of the school and nearly 80% of higher education institutions are private. The private sector will be in turn treated on par with the government sector in terms of regulations, autonomy, determining fees, etc., and opportunities, research funding from NRF, and so on. Regarding industry interaction, the policy encourages industry academic collaboration, such as establishing industry centers of excellence and incubation cells in institutions for learners, and using state-of-art resources available with industry and with educational institution by sharing such expensive items for educational purposes. NEP 2020 provides an integrated and flexible approach to education. Further, it has kept the interconnectedness of the various phases of education in mind and how the same will enable continuity, coherence, and processes to ultimately realize an end-to-end educational roadmap for the country. The present political system, under the visionary leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, has unambiguously declared that no efforts will be spared to implement this policy with all its multiple dimensions. It is now up to all of us, both at the individual and collective levels, to ensure that India makes smooth and rapid progress as it re-establishes itself as a knowledge powerhouse. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the man himself who has formulated the policy, Dr. Kasturirangan, giving us a comprehensive account of NEP 2020. And as he mentioned, it is a progressive shift towards a more scientific approach to education. The prescribed structure will help to cater the ability of the child, the stages of cognitive development, as well as the social and physical awareness. So more of a holistic development of a child, it promises. And as we now open our discussions and conversations, we have very eminent guest speakers joining us. Shri Vipin Kumar, the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Human Resource Development. Dr. Mrs. Pankaj Mittal, the Additional Secretary, UGC, and Secretary General of the Association of Indian Universities. Ms. Rekha Sharma, the Chairperson, National Commission for Women. Mr. Sridhar Srivastava, the Chairman, National Institute for Open Schooling. We also have Dr. MP Narayanan, the Vice Chairman, World Mining Congress and ex-CMD of Coal India Limited. And as Dr. Kasturirangan in his address, you must have heard the name of Shri K.J. Alphonse, the former tourism minister and the Honorable Member of Parliament. We were supposed to be joined by him also, but unfortunately he's not joined us. He's extended his good wishes. In fact, he has been a member of NEP 2020 drafting committee, and he has played a substantial role in bringing in 100% literacy in Nakulam district and Kottayam districts. And then he had also mentioned the name of Shri Suresh Prabhuji also, who was supposed to join us, but unfortunately, again, he's not been able to make it to discussions, but extended his good wishes. So with that, I would now first like to request and invite Ms. Roob Kirat, our overseas director, the overseas director of Indian Achievers Forum, who's joining us from Dubai, requesting her for her words of welcome for all our eminent guest speakers, inviting her for her welcome address. We are not getting your voice. I think the mic is...
Am I audible now?
Yeah, now.
Just want to thank you, and I'm absolutely thrilled and honored to be actually a part of this this very, very important discussion, because I think, like you said, that the NEP, which is the new education policy, it's coming at a very important time, and I'm sure that it, like also Dr. Kasturirangan, he mentioned that it's a very holistic, it's a very multifaceted, it's an integrated approach to education, which is not only going to provide a lot of flexibility to students at various stages, whether they're school-going students or at college level, but also make them absolutely future ready. And it is all happening on a very important day, because we know that today is the National Education Day, which we celebrate to commemorate the birth anniversary of the great scholar and independent India's first education minister, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad. I mean, like you also mentioned in your opening lead. And I, on behalf of the Indian Achievers Forum, welcome everyone to the seminar on the new Education Policy 2020. Now, year 2020, we all know, has been a roller coaster ride for all of us. And we saw some unprecedented and some anticipated events taking place during this year so far. But, one of the very important changes that was not only anticipated, but was also, like I said, that it was crucial to happen at this point in time, is in the form of the new Education Policy 2020 in India. I reckon this is a landmark change by the Indian government, as it replaced the 34-year-old NEP, making revolutionary reforms in our education system. And the new education policy seems promising to help India break into the top 3 economies in the world by the next decade, and also become a knowledge powerhouse, as Dr. Kasturirangan rightly mentioned. And in today's seminar, I'm sure that our learned panel members will throw more light on the subject and enlighten us about the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead in India's education system, and the role of the national education policy that will, the role that will play in that direction. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this discussion, very exciting discussion. And I give it back to you, Nimi, to please carry on with the summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for your views and perspective, and in fact, setting further the tone and the context of our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite our eminent guest speaker. We have Dr. Mrs. Pankaj Mittal, the Additional Secretary, UGC, which you all know is a Government of India body entrusted for the coordination, determination, and maintenance of standards of teaching, examination, and research in university education. And as Dr. Kasturirangan ji had pointed out, that there is going to be a complete revamp of in fact, teaching, training their trainers. That's incorporated in the NEP. Also, a lot of focus on the research is going to be taking place, and a new and a comprehensive national curriculum framework for teacher education 2021 is also being formulated by the National Council for Teacher Education in consultation with NCERT. So we are glad that Dr. Mrs. Pankaj Mittal has joined us, and she's also the Secretary General of the Association of Indian Universities. So with that, welcome to you, ma'am, and we look forward to your views and perspectives.
Thank you, Vimmi. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to Mr. Amit Goenka for inviting me here and to give me a chance or opportunity to interact with all of you. When we talk of national education policy, as you have heard from the earlier two speakers, education policy this time is a very, very forward-looking, innovative, and a student-centric policy. It is, of course, democratic because the consultation was done with more than 2.5 lakhs people this time, and that too not only from education sector, but from all walks of life, because the policy does affect each and every person in the country. But that more than that, it is a student-centric policy, because I believe that the students are the main stakeholders of any higher education system. Because we as Association of Indian Universities, or we as UGC or universities or teachers, we all exist just because of the teachers. So rightly so, the policy has given a lot of importance to the students, and the students are sort of treated like a king in the policy, with a lot of freedom of speech, freedom of choosing a subject, freedom of choosing a discipline, freedom of choosing multiple universities within a program, and freedom of speed, the speed with which they can be working. So a lot of freedom has been given to the students in this policy, and there are a lot of restructuring which is there in terms of university restructuring and the program restructuring, that will help the students in getting a quality education as well as a affordable education, which will make them more employable. For example, the concept of ABC, which is mentioned in the policy, that is a very, very innovative concept. In ABC, that is Academic Bank of Credit. You deposit credits like you deposit money in the commercial bank, and for depositing credits, you get admission in different courses. Like right now, we get admission in different programs, full program, BA, BCom, BSc, MA. But in new education policy, you will be able to get admission in various courses, that is papers within the program. Like in BA, if you have 16, 20 papers, so those are 20 courses. So now onwards, after the ABC is implemented, the admission in courses will be possible, and a student will be able to do different courses from different universities. And when he has the threshold number of courses or credits with him, because whenever he does courses from different universities, the credits are deposited in the account, in his or her account in the ABC, and with those credits he can go to any university and get a degree and redeem his credits for getting a degree. So this type of a concept is a very, very novel concept, in which the student can do any number of courses from any number of universities, both Indian universities, foreign universities, and both from face-to-face as well as online mode. So this type of facility was never existing in the past. Similarly, when they talk of multiple entry and exit, so today when you talk of, say, if you are doing some academic programs, say BA, BSc, BCom. So if you have to leave in between, say after 1 year or 2 years, you don't get any certificate or any diploma. So if you have to come back after 10 years, you have to start afresh from the first year itself. And also, if you leave in between, you don't get any certification. Therefore, no employment after these in intermediary stages. So now the policy says that there will be multiple entry and exit. So after first year, you will get a certificate. After 2 years, you will get a diploma. So after 10 years, if you want to come back to higher education, you get a lateral entry straight away to third year. So whatever you study in the first 2 years, that doesn't go waste. So this was never existing in the past. So that is something very good for the students. and then the multidisciplinary in which the student can learn any subject. I mean, if I'm enrolled in physics, I need not necessarily read mathematics and chemistry only. I can read music, as Dr. Kasturirangan was also saying. I can learn dance, I can learn economics, political science, sociology, any subject. So that is something great in the policy, that I can learn according to my interest and my passion. There won't be any restriction on me. So a lot of freedom is there to the students. And then one more innovative thing which is happening now, which everybody was waiting for a long time, is that top 100 universities will be able to establish their campuses in India. So now when that happens, our students, I mean, right now about 10 lakh people are going from India abroad every year for studying in foreign universities, and they are spending something like $2 to $3 billion in foreign education. So that $2 to $3 billion we can save if our students stay here. And if they want to study in foreign universities, they can study in foreign universities sitting in India only. And the cost of living in India is less, therefore the cost of studying in India will be less. So they will be saving on that. Plus our universities, the Indian universities, they can collaborate a lot with these foreign universities in terms of, say, research collaborations, in terms of teaching collaborations, in terms of student exchange, teacher exchange, semester exchange, curriculum exchange. So that will be something which will be very, very beneficial for our universities in terms of collaborations, in terms of competition, in terms of saving our foreign exchange. So internationalization, the way it is promoted in the policy, is again something which we should welcome very much in our higher education space. And it is really going to change the higher education landscape, and it is going to really transform the higher education space, in the sense that India, which was a Vishwaguru once upon a time, like in the institution like Nalanda, there were 10,000 students with that small population at that point of time. And today we have 46,000 foreign students in our country with such a large population. So that India is on the road to become, on the way to become a Vishwaguru, if this policy is implemented in letter and spirit, and if and also the policy implementation rests more with the universities rather than the government. Government has to take some steps, but they are not more than 20% of the policy recommendations. So 70 to 80% of the recommendations are to be implemented at the level of the universities. So universities should gear them up, gear themselves up, they should tighten their belts, and they start implementing the policy. And if the policy is not implemented in letter and spirit, the good document, the best document which we have, which we are sort of proud of, that will only sort of decorate our shelves and almirahs. It will not come to the ground. So the onus lies on the universities to implement this policy in letter and spirit.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. And as you said, that if implemented in letter and spirit, then India definitely has once again a chance of becoming a Vishwa Guru. And hopefully, the onus lies, of course, as you said, on the universities. So, more challenge for the universities here. But yes, as you said, giving it is a very the child-centric or student-centric policy, giving the students a choice of selecting their subjects, also multiple exit points and entry points. At the same time, the more of foreign universities will be coming here. And that is where we can look forward to more of collaborations and partnerships with these foreign universities also. And Indian students sitting here are going to be getting the best of the global knowledge coming actually at their doorsteps. So that brain drain, which is a major concern right now, that's going to be prevented. So thank you for highlighting these very key points of the NEP 2020 with respect to higher education. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And another thing which the new education policy promises is, many of you might be knowing that there are not many students or not many children who join school and then retreat back. So there are close to 2 crore out of school children. NEP 2020 aims to bring these 2 crore out of school children back into the mainstream through an open schooling system. Now that leads me to our next eminent speaker. We have Mr. Srivastava, the chairman of the National Institute for Open Schooling, which has the largest open schooling system in the world. So welcome to you, Mr. Srivastava. And if you can enlighten us a little more about the very genesis of NIOS, its vision and mission, and your views on NEP.
Uh, so thank you, Vimmi. This is a very great opportunity for me. And being amidst these great architects, we just listened to Honorable Minister and then Kasturirangan ji, who was the lead for the national education policy. And I am very thankful to Mr. Amit Goenka ji, for giving me this opportunity on this forum, Indian Achievers Forum. As you just mentioned that I am from the National Institute of Open Schooling, and you put a worry of bringing this huge number of out-of-school children in the fore of education. I would just like to tell you here that as I am basically from National Council of Educational Research and Training, so I would like to say a few words about the school sector. We just listened Dr. Pankaj Mittal for the higher education sector, and for the school education sector, also I would like to speak, because now the policy has come in a way that there will be no hard separation. Means like the formal system or the open system or alternative model of schooling, all these things are to be taken or seen by different stakeholders in a very holistic manner. I tell you how. You see, as Dr. Kasturirangan ji was giving a figure, a data that in the coming time, about 50% of our population will be below the age of 35 years. So in a way, we can think that by 35 years, the child has to complete the schooling, that he has to enter into the adulthood and just going for the higher education and then joining the world of work. So this whole gamut policy has thought about. And there you see the basic principles that the policy, this national education policy, which depends upon, is a few things. You know, we have our constitutional commitments, and every policy, every program has to keep honor that. Yes, we are doing that. We have been doing that. But certain new principles or certain such points which policy has emphasized very greatly are like this. For example, identifying the talent of a child and then nurturing it. Just moving ahead from the rote memorization. We have to see that the child achieves the competency or the skills. So these 2 points are very important, and then respect for diversity, local context, content. So if we see that these basic principles, which the policy, this 60-page document very clearly says and tells, and we also consider it very closely, and we should think that this document has come after great consultation, ideation, and churning of thought. I tell you, because I belong to National Council of Educational Research and Training, and presently I am joint director of this institution, and I am also looking after National Institute of Open Schooling. I tell you, we as institutions have learned a lot. We were involved in the process of that great consultation when it started, and 2015, I recall we went for different state up to the district level, huge consultation, student, teacher, parents, question answer sessions, what should be there in the policy, what are the concerns, teacher from different, teacher in a private school, teacher in a remote area, some teacher giving some idea about assessment, some teacher giving some idea about pedagogy. All these things were documented, and which has formed a place in this policy. One more point I want to make, that I just want to recall the time that Shri Prakash Javadekar ji, Honorable Minister, was mentioning, and if you turn the pages of the policy, if term comes again and again, learning outcome, and the whole teaching learning process as envisaged in the present National Education Policy 2020 has to keep this learning outcome in center. And what is this? This is that at each grade level, there is a very clear cut statement that in this particular area or this is particular domain of knowledge, at this class stage, child should be able to do that. Child should be able to perform in this manner. And more importantly, how the child will attain that, for that the pedagogical process is suggested there. We should be very clear that it's not recommendatory. It's only suggested. The teacher has to see in her classroom that what is the different level of the child, what is the contextual situation of the child, what is the background of the child, what is the socioeconomic background of the child, what is the mother tongue of the child, and then teacher has to see that what pedagogical process we should adhere to, so that we will be able to see that the child achieves this learning outcome. And this is a thing which found a place in February 2017 when the government notified it in the Right to Education. And we as an institution, we as an expert, we have learned a lot before this policy has come before us. As Professor Kasturirangan was mentioning, and the points that I am going to say, I want to just request you all that you keep this target, that if this country, which is going to be 50% population below the age of 35, and it has to be a knowledge powerhouse, then you see this policy has very beautifully given that there will be no hard separation, there will be no hard boundaries between what? Between the no hard boundaries between the streams. And Dr. Pankaj Mittal was also mentioning for the higher education and for the school education also. The policy says it very clearly that there will be no hard boundaries for streams, art, science, social science, commerce.
So it is multidisciplinary.
Yeah, multidisciplinary.
Multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, multidisciplinary approach. And then there will be no hard boundaries between curricular, co-curricular, or extracurricular. There will be no hard boundaries between academic, sports, or vocational. So, and national education policy also fits in here very well, because national education policy, National Institute of Open Schooling has already been giving the opportunity to children to go for the vocational education along with the main stream, academic stream. And this policy also says, and one more point I want to make, that all these things what we are talking requires reform in assessment also, because assessment has to be done in a manner so that it should be very holistic. If we want that our children should have the 21st century skill, we say that there should be creativity or innovation, there should be critical thinking or problem solving, collaboration or communication. So the assessment day in, day out has to be like that. Then only the child will be given an opportunity to perform in a manner so that the teacher can see that child is achieving these goals, 21st century skills. So teacher training is very important. Policy says very well about that. Policy is there, and we are now feeling as an organization that there is a great synergy. I tell you, I just want to inform you all that the organization within the ministry are working in tandem. Discussions, tasks, it is distributed, and now you just recall this pandemic situation, which has not only raised question about the life, but about the livelihood also. So this policy has come, and tasks are defined, and the organizations are working in tandem, and we are trying to meet the milestones of the task, and we are working in collaboration, and we will be achieving the goals of the policy. And before ending my words here, I would simply request you all that on this forum such discussion should be getting chance of performance, means such discussion should come up more often, when we can threadbare discuss about taking one or two points with some more time with parents or different stakeholders. So with these words, I again thank you all for giving me this chance, and thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your views on the school education and how vocational education also, as you mentioned, it is going to be incorporated, being a part of the school education. I think in class sixth, vocational education is going to be introduced along with internship. So not just the higher education, but even the school education, multidisciplinary approach. I'll come back to you, sir, as I would also like to discuss certain challenges which you see in implementing it on ground. If there are any challenges which you see, I'll come back to you. But before that, we have Professor Ashutosh Sharma ji joining us, respected Secretary, Ministry of Science and Technology. And NEP, as you know, it aims to promote a culture of research. A national research foundation will be created as an apex body for fostering a strong research culture and building research capacities across higher education. Also in NEP 2020, as was stated earlier, a multidisciplinary approach is being adopted in a multidisciplinary education and research universities, which are going to be at par with the IITs and IIMs, are going to be set up as models of best multidisciplinary education of global standards in the country. So herein we would like to seek the views of Professor Ashutosh, Secretary, Science and Technology, who himself is known for his pioneering research work in the areas of colloids, thin films, nanoparticles. And he's an institute chair professor at C.V. Seshadri, chair professor at the Department of Chemical Engineering of Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. So welcome to you, sir. And we request now for your views and perspective.
Namaskar, Vimmi, and everybody else who's
Yes, sir.
here. I'm so glad that we are discussing education, and in particular, I would focus on science, technology, and innovation aspects because there is not enough time to discuss everything related to education. But I'm so glad that this is happening after 3 decades, that we have such a compelling policy that is very inclusive, very holistic, and it does take into account so very many different factors that we all keep discussing over time. Indeed, it's been my 30 years working in the area of education, science, technology, research, and so on, innovation. So there are some lessons from the ground, and I'm so delighted that all of these have been very ably incorporated and discussed with actionable items in this policy that we are discussing. So now, if we were to talk about, I don't want to focus too much on the school education aspect, even though the foundational work actually is done there. Now, what does that mean? It means that to begin with, look, science technology is really about experimental education. So the experimental education, while it has always been there, you know it, I know it, that half the labs actually never open. And there's a very good reason as to why experimental education is totally neglected. What do you think is a good reason for it? Well, it does not figure in cracking exams. And since the education had become totally exam centric, and any activity which is not rewarded, you see, so while people might take an ideal view of the world, the fact is that the bottom line is cracking those exams and getting on with life. And if it does not figure in there, it's not going to be valued. And if it's not valued, unfortunately, we would keep producing scientists who have very little insight and stamina, in fact, for doing experimental sciences. And much of the global science today is driven by technology, is driven by instruments, is driven by a whole lot of measurement techniques, and so on. In fact, if you look at the rise of nanotechnology, it's totally, it's not just driven by theories, it's driven by the instruments like atomic force microscopy and so on. So the simple point is, we have to bring back the focus very tightly, not just in a school. School is really the foundation, but I know even in colleges is totally ignored. So I'm be very glad to see that we have the focus there. Now, coming back to the higher education and science, technology, and innovation needs of higher education, you see, there's a twilight zone. That twilight zone between education and research begins at the level of PhD. So this is where really is really the playground for research. If you would, this is about training our future scientists. It is about transiting from formal blackboard-based passive education to creation of your own thoughts, your knowledge, your creativity, your independence. And if you just think about it very simply, it is such a big dislocation because for all these years, 22 years, I don't know, 25 years, people have been trained to pay attention to blackboard and exams. And here you are telling them that all of that maybe has not much sense going forward in the future, then now you have to be your own master about you recognize what the problems are, you find the solutions to those problems. So it is such a huge dislocation. People are totally disoriented because they want to continue with the same model of education that they have been subjected to all their life, and they have known no other life. So it is very critical that we pay attention to that phase of life in bringing in the quality, in bringing in the profoundness, in bringing in the independence of thought, in bringing in being critical in everything that one reads, in developing that self confidence. And indeed, the culture of research is all about that. Is about not saying this great university XYZ in the world, because they are doing this, I will also do something incremental, publish 2 papers, whatever it takes, right? That's of course necessary, but that's just the initial training. So, we want people who are risk takers, and not just students, but also their mentors, and not only saying risk taking in terms of being profound, in terms of being out of box, in terms of bringing in the quality of thought which is required in order for us to be counted among the top nations in science and technology. Not just students, but the mentors too. I mean, you see, oftentimes it happens. I've seen in universities, etc., that somebody did PhD 20 years ago, and that person is still continuing with the same area, with the same problem, with the same tools. So if we're not going to communicate the future challenges which are coming up faster and faster at us, if we are not going to be prepared for new things, if we are not prepared for a lifetime of learning. So at this point, let me just slow down a little bit and say, look, education as an overarching principle. Education is not the content of education because that keeps changing. And now we would keep on needing new skills. We would keep on needing new education, new skills, new jobs. And therefore, learning becomes a lifelong pursuit. And what are these disruptive changes that we have to be prepared for? Uh, and of course, the foundation being the education. And now you see sustainable development, the rise of intelligent machines, you call them artificial intelligence, machine learning, Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, robotics. application, the data science, all of it applied to so many different sectors and every aspect of the activity and life that we have, from governance, from the definition of democracy, from financial systems, everything is going to be under huge stress. So, sustainable development, the rise of intelligent machines, the renewable energy, which means that there's a huge pressure in redesigning grids and so on. I'm just giving a few examples, right? What does it mean? It means that education cannot be static. It cannot be all in my textbook, uh, right? And so it is a lifelong capacity for keep on learning and solving problems, which is really the fulcrum on which education has to move. And while talking about the fact that we have to solve problems, it's not about disciplines. Now, if you take a problem in energy or water or health or transport, or any of these things, environment, climate, these are not problems of a single discipline, and people are very reluctant to cross the boundaries of departments and disciplines. So they, because recruitment happens at department level, the promotions happen at department level. Everything happens, by knowing your peer group in your so-called discipline, whether it is organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, physical chemistry, chemical engineering, electrical engineering, whatever. Right? People have a great psychological comfort in belonging, which is very good. Right? We all belong to some community or other, but we are not the center of this universe. So what it basically means is that you have an understanding totally of the other people who would be your partners in solving this problem. This requires a great psychological shift. Even talking to social scientists, talking to humanities people, and I'm so glad to see that this particular policy addresses that particular point. In fact, I tell you from my personal experience, I never talk to chemical engineers. I'm a chemical engineer because I would get nothing from those people. I already know it, right? So who should I talk to? I should talk to those people who can actually teach me something new. And so therefore, all learning happens by gradient. It's a scientific term. It means that there is a flow from high to low. Unless you have a high, it's the same thing about learning chess. Unless you play with grandmaster, you would learn nothing. So, so this is a very critical aspect, and so improving the quality of our thoughts, of our PhD, our postdocs, all of that. I must also say that in parallel, there is another policy coming up now, which is Science, Technology, Innovation Policy 2020. We are in the last legs of it, and you see, so wherever you have this twilight zone between education and research and innovation, all of that would be addressed totally in that particular policy. So therefore, all the positive elements that you have going in education, they would get into research, R&D aspects, because there's a whole lot of overlapping systems in both of these. Now, I don't know how much time I have. I can speak for 2 hours if you want it to be really deep, or I can conclude in 2 minutes. So what is it going to be? So let me just take one more point, which is really close to my heart, which is we talked about multidisciplinary, but you see, it requires a structure. Now, because we are department centric, and I already hinted at the fact that department centric structures are very self serving, that they are very self centric, right? And how do you break these silos? So I've always been saying that, look, we need actually a parallel structure in education, which you may call a research school, whatever. So a person, a faculty, a scientist actually belongs equally to these two structures. One is basically for undergraduate teaching, which is our concept of departments, because you need to teach certain kind of courses to give you a degree in organic chemistry or whatever, right? But research goes ways beyond that, and we want it to be interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. The only way to do that would be that all the administrative decisions like recruitment, promotion, all of that has to happen at two different levels of organization. So we call it department, undergraduate teaching, and we call a research entity, call it a school, whatever you may want to call it. But people from different departments are actually members of that school. And so all the administrative things are basically taken care by these two units. So unless we talk about the architecture, structure, and processes, multidisciplinary thinking will remain a lip service. I mean, I can give you 100% guarantee of it. And I scold these directors of IIT so much every time I meet them. I say, you sitting in this meeting, you're talking about interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. Now you tell me, here is a great guy, a great scientist, who's got his undergraduate education in physics, and he has done PhD in chemical engineering. Are you going to recruit him as a faculty member? The jaws drop, and they say, the departments will not accept him, right? So because we are so conditioned to think about science in silos, right? And the final thought that I want to leave you with is about diversity, inclusion, and equity. Why is that important? So oftentimes people think, oh, well, it's a little bit, it's like little political and so on, and it's not that at all. So it has nothing to do with it. You do nobody a favor by emphasizing diversity, inclusion, and equity. And you do yourself a favor if you want to do great science, if you want to do good science, you want to do technology, because the problems we have now, these overarching problems, take, for example, sustainable development. This requires multiple perspectives. You cannot exclude anybody. If, like I already said, I don't talk to people who are chemical engineers because I want to bring in diversity. I want to bring in different perspectives. So if we say, look, women today, look, when I was doing an undergrad at one of the IITs 40 years ago, there were 3 women in my batch of 250. Today there are 11, right? So in 40 years, we have just crawled, like, okay, this really bad rate of growth. And we can't wait another 40 years to bring it from 11 to 15, right? That's horrible, is not acceptable at all. So therefore, uh, having multiple perspectives, having diversity of perspectives, and recognizing problems and their solutions, it's very important that we have diversity, which is, of course, gender is the greatest example of to bringing in that diversity, to bring in leadership, to bring in role models, especially in those areas of technology in the top schools which are underrepresented hugely, right? It's just there are nobody out there to see, oh, how we're going to do it, right? And of course, there are other aspects of diversity, which is about age. We have to really scout for younger people. You see, I don't divide people or population in terms of young and old. There are no old people. I haven't met anybody. But there are young people, there are younger people, and so on. So these younger people have to be empowered because they have the energy and new ideas. The not so young people like me, we have more experience. So it is about the fusion between the energy and experience. And let nobody divide the society by saying, this is young, this is old, and these perpetual fights about all of this is very silly. So now in every committee that form, in every awards and everything, we make sure that there is a diversity of age and gender. And this is very important. This is where we begin. And I'm sure that, how do we implement the policy aspects? Well, you implement them starting from home. We also putting in a rating and ranking framework for the institutions, for R&D labs. Of course, you see, not all science happens in educational institutions, so there is a whole lot of ecosystem beyond it. For example, R&D labs, for example, industry, for example, corporate sector, and all of that. But we want to bring in a ranking, rating framework for gender equality and the progress that we are making in that. So, see, if we don't know where we stand, what are the parameters in which we are weak or strong, then we cannot know what actions are required to move in that direction. So, whole idea in this framework is not for anybody to make them look bad, but for them to know where they stand. And so, therefore, they can have right kind of actions that would propel this forward. And so we would, of course, need participation and partnership with educational institutions, as well as, of course, the other labs and wherever science might happen and technology. So these are some very quick thoughts. If you want me to do more, I can do more. Um, it's up to you. I am free for another 15 minutes, unfortunately.
I just wanted to also understand from you that, by when do you see this policy will be in letter? It is very good. But when it comes to, again, we've been talking about the challenges towards the
Yeah.
implementation. So by when do you think it's going to be fully implemented? And you've also spoken about, more than the acceptance to it, more than just the structural changes, even
Oh,
the
yeah.
mindset changes, people accepting
Those are the
these
only,
changes are also
yeah,
to come.
those are the only
So what are
changes that
the
matter actually.
yeah.
You see, because even look at gender
Hmm.
equality, diversity, is actually not a problem of science and education. It is a problem of culture. So, in fact, I'll tell you that anything you want to
Hmm.
implement, any aspect of it, it must be holistic. So, I'll give you an example. There's a new
Hmm.
scheme that we are putting in as a pilot project this year in 50 districts, and then it'll be scaled up to all the districts next year. This is called Vigyan Jyoti. And the purpose of this scheme is that in our top technology institutions like IITs, NITs, and so on, in the underrepresented streams of knowledge, how do we bring in more girls? Right? A very simple
Hmm.
objective. Now, the objective looks simple. You could do it by saying, look, I create more positions, but that's not a good solution, right? I mean,
Hmm.
is part of the solution, but it's not full solution, because what happens is you want to prepare people before they get there. They should not look inferior. They have to be totally prepared and totally competitive, right?
Hmm.
Which means that they need to be prepared culturally, they need to be prepared psychologically, they need to be prepared financially, they need to be prepared and pumped up by role model interactions and leadership out there. So all of that has to be done holistically, and this is what we are doing now with 2,500 girls who have performed great in high school, and next year it would be 50,000 top performing girls from all the boards in high school. So 2 years of training. So those girls who were not really fence sitting and their parents are fence sitters, and they are not sending them for coaching. We know it's very hard to crack exams without coaching, and there could be financial constraints. So all of that and cultural constraints. So anyway, coming back to the point that you said, look at the problem of climate change. The
Hmm.
problem of climate change is not a problem of technology. It is a problem of deep cultural, political, sociological aspects. It is basically greed versus need
Hmm.
battle, right?
Hmm.
And so this is where every single person has to partake in that process. It cannot, it's too important a problem to be outsourced to only scientists, only politicians, only this section of society or that section of society, right? So it requires great awareness. And so many of those things are happening, right? But they have to happen at a level of 100x intensity than what we have now. You see, and now today, because we are talking about climate change, and it's very closely related both to education and science and technology. As an example, now we accept, society as a whole accepts that it's okay to live with 2 degree Celsius temperature rise at the end of this century. And even if
Hmm.
we attain that, we would have done something great, right?
Hmm.
With 3 degrees centigrade rise, all our coastal cities would be underwater. And remember that planet Earth is not here for 1 century. If we were to plan for 1 century, then we are so short-sighted that you cannot even believe it. We have to plan for at least 5 centuries, if not for 5 millennia. Who's going to do it? I mean, not somebody up there is going to do it. It is our collective responsibility, making use of education, making use of science and technology and innovation instruments at our disposal. But it requires a very fundamental turning around in the deepest seat of our consciousness. Who is
Yeah.
going to do it, right?
Hmm.
So I think a good policy must address these issues very squarely. This window of opportunity would not be open forever. Whether it is our demographic dividend, now we
Hmm.
have these strengths: demographic dividend, we have design, we have R&D. By the way, India is number three in the number of scientific papers that are published, right behind China and US, right? So what that means is we have a strength, we have very deep strength in terms of generating knowledge or creating knowledge. Where is our weakness? So if we are so strong, we are number three in the world, right? So people would of course ask a legitimate question that if we are so strong in this, why it's not impacting our economy in a big way, for example, right? And what about societal fruits? How is science reaching society? They are very legitimate questions, right? So now, so the weakness, and this is for the benefit of everybody who's listening to us, because this is not something which is routinely appreciated, right? Which is people just say, hey, our science can't be too strong because it's not reflecting in our glory. But the weakness is not in creation of knowledge. The weakness is in consumption of knowledge. These are two entirely different ecosystems. You
So
create
where are we
knowledge.
lacking, sir? Where are we? Why are we lacking in that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'll give you two things. The consumption of knowledge that you create. Now, who consumes the knowledge? The knowledge is not consumed in university, which creates knowledge. The knowledge is consumed in industry, is
Yeah.
consumed by government, is consumed by NGOs, is consumed by self-help groups, a whole lot of these things, right? It is our connect between these two ecosystems of knowledge creation and knowledge consumption. That connect is the weak link. Another weak link is our knowledge consumption systems, right? Industry, for example. So now a lot of people say, hey, why is it happening in Stanford? Why is it happening in MIT? Why didn't it happen in IIT down there? Right? They have not understood the problem at all. They have not understood the problem that there is a push of knowledge and there is a pull of knowledge. And this push and pull have to work like this together in order for knowledge ecosystem to succeed as a whole, not in parts. Because parts we have already shown that there is strength, but that strength is not being leveraged, right? Now, why does that happen? You see, our industry historically is not knowledge industry. It is not Google. It is not Microsoft. It is not even, I mean, from the traditional areas, energy companies and so on. Sometimes there was a joke. The joke is that you see, for an industry to succeed, it is not what you know, but who you know that matters. So that is changing, right? I will give you another example. So why did it happen at Stanford, MIT? Because people, the industry is looking for knowledge. Why are they looking for knowledge? Because for them to remain competitive, they need knowledge, right? And so unless we have that realization that for us to be globally competitive, there is no other way but through knowledge, right? Imagine Google today, if they stop doing R&D, they would be wiped off the face of this earth in 3 years. Their competitors will gain the advantage. We don't feel that existential crisis. You see, this is a whole point. And so I would also conclude this point. We can discuss for 2 more hours if you like. Not today, some other day. I would totally love to talk about these things. So I would conclude by giving an analogy that people can understand. See, we have two goddesses in India. They are called Lakshmi and Saraswati, right? If those of us who know the personality of these two goddesses, I can guarantee you that Saraswati is unlikely to chase Lakshmi. But Lakshmi can chase Saraswati if she realizes the value in her for her own work, which means to create more moolah, which is to create more money, which is to create more opportunities, socio-economic opportunities. If Lakshmi was convinced that Saraswati has something to offer that would help her in her work, then this would happen. And this is exactly what happens around MIT. I know this personally, right? So there are people who have a check and they get into a professor's office, they put the check there, which is a hefty check, and they say, look, we want to have this problem solved, and this is how it works. So this is also deeply cultural. And that is why I keep coming back to the cultural aspects, even more than the formal aspects, which are, we can control through ministry, we can control through, university administration and so on. They go some way, those formal structures. But the cultural aspect is extremely important. This is all about being lost in translation. So when a businessman talks to a scientist, they are actually talking like this at cross purposes, which
Mm.
they don't understand what is the value in it for them. So it is not about the other guy, it is about you, right? So
Mm.
if you understand what is the value that it brings to you, right,
Mm.
this is the only way it's going to happen, because everybody is what you call self-centered, and we are selfish. That's how we are designed. It's not our fault, right? This is how biology designed us. Unless we take that into account, that you see, these two people have to work together for their own good, right? It is not something imposed from the top. Of course, one can sweeten the deal through policies, and one can say, look, I'll give you some tax breaks and stuff, and incentivization for either of the two people to work together, and so on. That will go some way, right? But how through education we create respect both for social good, socio-economic opportunities, and knowledge, the role of knowledge in that. You see, because of our education, we are very dismissive of knowledge. Even the intelligent people. I'm not talking about just person on the street. A person who is a crorepati, who's making billions, millions. He has basically a very deep-seated contempt for knowledge.
Mm.
This is very strange, and how it has come about. It has come about because our education has not conveyed the excitement of learning, and
Yeah.
how that learning can be transformed into opportunities. So
Mm.
education has been completely isolated as an activity which is not part of our larger life, right? Which
Mm.
is for only cracking exams, is for getting a job. It is only a stepping stone to the next, the real world. There is no
Mm.
real world out there. The real world is what we create. And the future, as I said, is quantum technologies coming at us. It is cyber physical systems coming at us. And the future is coming at faster and faster rate.
Mm.
People don't realize that. We don't have time, right? And so the time is only to roll up your sleeves and jump right into it, right? And that excitement, which has to be all pervasive from school to college to university, that
Mm.
these great things are happening, and we are part of that. How do we convey that? You see, very simply, I put this larger question because, and there are a whole lot of elements in this education policy
Mm.
that address that point. Now, you said, how do we implement them, right? So, implementation, of course, happens when people are totally convinced and they are on board, right? Because they see that this is the right way to do it. Even
Mm.
though it may has some dislocation, it creates some pain. And so I keep saying I'm concluding, isn't it? And I'll go on a tangent. So now this is totally the last thing I'm going to say. The last thing I'm going to say, because this is so valuable. Education is about problem solving. It is not about content of education. What we have learned, of course, they make a foundation. It's not about cracking exams at
Mm.
all. Zero. Okay. How do we get away from that evil? Is my question to all the learned scholars here. And finally, I say, look, there are three ways of solving a problem. So if education is about solving a problem, then we must understand that there are basically three ways of solving a problem that in Hindi I call Jugaad, Dhanda, and Panga. There is very little element of Panga in our education, which is what you would roughly translate in English as disruptive ways of solving problems, not
Mm.
textbook style of solving problems. So, are we actually exciting people, inspiring them to think out of box, to be creative, to take risk, to be independent, and
Mm.
say to hell with I mean, what somebody is saying, to be irreverential, in fact.
Mm.
So this some amount of being irreverential has to be a very strong foundation of our education. So, I mean, people get personally offended. A teacher gets personally offended if somebody asks him too many questions,
Mm.
and there's always a question of authority. Look,
Mm.
in the real science, doing great education, there is no authority, right?
Mm.
We must be very clear about it. There are actually two models of education. The ancient model of education has been sitting at the feet of your guru, The Western model of education, especially in science and technology, is standing on the shoulders of your guru. Now it looks like that there is some conflict between these two models of education, but actually there is no conflict. When I want to learn something really beautiful and intimately, I have to sit at the feet of master. When I
mm,
want to see beyond what master can see, this is where I can be, this is what you call research. This is where I can be independent. Then I have to stand on the shoulders of my master. And it is not to show any disrespect, right? We respect people for what they have done, who they are, and their age and their experience and their contributions. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with being independent in our thoughts, to be critical, to judge things by my own reason and my own logic and my experience. In fact, this is not anything new. Of course, while it is a bedrock of science, this is something that Gautam Buddha said 2,500 years ago. What did he say? He said, believe nobody. It doesn't matter if I said it,
mm.
unless it squares with your own experience, your own logic, right? So I would leave it at that. And this is the bedrock of doing everything great in this world, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so very much, sir.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, sir. Thank
Seriously,
you so much.
so
I
deeper
overshot
thoughts
totally my
on.
time.
Hey, not at all, sir. It was a pleasure listening to you, and a lot of learning. In fact, so many deeper thoughts you extended on what education, the relevance of education, being actually, knowledge being a or education being a social process which has so much of social and economic relevance, and also uh, on what you mentioned about when you have to imbibe knowledge from the guru, you sit at the feet of the guru, and when you're going beyond, foresee beyond, then that is when you can be at par or almost at the shoulder of the guru. So yes, uh, I hope we are able to implement this policy in actually in spirit. There are a lot many hurdles, and it starts from us only. The acceptance from us, and it takes me back on what Sadhguruji had said, that we even in a science lab we keep dissecting. We dissect a cockroach or I mean try looking into.
Right.
But what about, and then so many other engineerings? But what about our own inner engineering, which we
Yes.
don't pay attention to? So I think
Yeah,
it's
education is about balance. You see,
yeah.
and it is so important you said about dissecting. It's not just about dissecting frogs and cockroaches. We also
Mm,
dissect knowledge. So
yeah.
what we did first, we dissected knowledge into thin slices of knowledge. Then we
Mm,
start calling them by this or that discipline and department. We are
mm,
very good at that. We have gotten very good at that in 2 centuries, right?
mm,
Now, what about the reverse process of
mm,
reassembling these slices of knowledge to make a whole?
mm.
We are totally, totally lost at that,
Chandra.
right? So it is what is called analysis versus synthesis, right?
Mm,
There is no course in this world, certainly not in India, that teaches synthesis, right?
mm.
So you see, what is our education? It is from chapter to chapter, it is from exam to exam, it is from
Yeah.
course to course, it is from degree to degree. But
Mm,
there is no synthesis of anything
mm,
that I have learned, right? To
mm,
solve problem. And
mm,
solving problem is only about synthesis. It's not about analysis at all.
mm,
Analysis only to help you understand, like I said, undergraduate teaching, right?
mm,
Because the same guy, unfortunately, cannot teach thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. They have not specialized in that. So, because of convenience, we have made thin slices of knowledge by
mm,
dissecting it. But
mm,
that's not the solution, right? The solution is, and another thing, I'm so happy to see that there's more talk, there's more discussion about other branches of knowledge other than science and technology and medicine and law, right? These
mm,
are, all the bright people get into it. Now I
mm,
ask people, who's going to do archaeology? Who's going to
mm,
do history? Who's going to
mm.
do philosophy? You see, we are not generating our knowledge systems. Even the old Indian, ancient Indian philosophy is nearly lost. Why?
Yeah.
Because we are only training some people, I mean, in these Western philosophy courses, we don't have quality, today. And why there is no quality? Because the brightest of people, all the youngsters, they are doing engineering and medicine.
Mm.
This is totally distorted society, right?
Mm.
I mean, at the end of your life, at the end of the day, you also want to see some good performing arts.
Yeah.
Is you people don't live by doing technology alone, right?
Mm.
Imagine if each one of us, everyone in the society was only an MBA. What a
Mm.
horrible society would that be? They're all trying to sell each other something, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, which is a good activity, but it's not the end of life. It's not
Yeah.
even the beginning of life. So these distortions have crept into society and education because of what we value. And we are totally blind in valuing only certain kind of things,
Mm.
right? So we have to create opportunities, no matter if you are a bright historian, if you are a bright philosopher, and whatever it is. This is the balance of life. This is the balance of society.
Mm.
Balance
True.
is the only key factor there ever is in this life, and so that's why education has to be preparation for that balance. Much of what the debates that go on in social media, why do you think they're going on? Because people have no balance.
Mm.
So we are always situated at the extremes,
Mm.
right? So it's saying you are leftist, I am rightist, you are something, right? You are this, you are that. Everybody is differentiating the other
Mm.
person instead of seeing what is common between us, which is called synthesis. We
Mm.
are only saying you are wearing blue, I am wearing black, and so therefore we are different. And we
Mm.
go about, just wasting our time
Mm.
by doing all of this. We have to bring in positivity in what we do. I just remembered one of the things I'm so fond of saying because my own copyright. So I keep, when I go to a convocation, I talk to younger people, I tell them, look, first thing you should do is lose energy vampires, right?
Mm.
And these energy vampires are the people, if you sit with them for half an hour, you will become zombified for the rest of the day. Because everything which is wrong with this world, right? All of this is going to seep in with such great force that you would have no energy and desire left to do anything in this world except to become cynical
Mm.
and to start criticizing everything that happens, right? First thing younger
Mm.
people should do, lose the energy vampire, no matter how bewitching this gossip is. So all of us, we
Mm.
join these clubs because it's so bewitching. It takes my mind off. It blames somebody else for the problems that I have and have been created by me, right? So
Mm.
we say somebody out there is not doing the job, and that's why this society is so bad. Instead of saying, look, the job that I have to do at the end of the day, right? And then worry about other people what they are doing or not, right? Nobody says that the job I have to do. When people say people have to be fair, but the same person who is saying other people have to be fair, when he sits in a committee,
Mm.
he's going to behave in a different way. So
Mm.
these are all part of education. This is part of our value system. And if
Yeah.
an education does not convey value system, it conveys very little, I'm afraid.
Mm.
Okay,
So
thank you, Vimiji, so very much.
yeah, thank you. No, thank you, sir. In fact, lessons of life we have learned today from you. Thank you once again. And किसी समय और वैसे if we have some more time, we'll definitely take this conversation forward. So, सर आपका हाँ माइक शायद आपका बंद हो गया है.
Oh,
माइक
yes.
माइक
Because I was going to leave, right? So I
हाँ.
turned that off. But
Okay.
now, so any
Just
time
take 2 minutes of yeah, just
you
two
want to go
minutes of your
deeper, you want to go
huh.
deeper into this. Anytime you want to, anybody want to go deeper into this and look at the micro aspects of what we are talking, right? These are views from height. A view
Hmm.
from height is important, right? Then you gain the big picture, but then you
Hmm.
have to come down to the ground, right?
Yeah.
In order to be able to do it, right? To translate what you saw up there into actions, right? So it is a balance between the view from top and the view on the ground is what makes anything successful or not, right?
Hmm.
So anytime, even there are so many different aspects of this stuff here. Each one of them actually is worth a very long session with participation of other people who want to contribute. about any of these aspects. Like even you say, look, in education and in research, what is the role of analysis versus synthesis, right? It's a very focused topic. And how do you actually introduce that in there? How do you actually get teachers who would be able to do it, right?
Mm.
How do you inject excitement of learning in your research? I've always found I've been a professor 25 years, right? And from the beginning, when I started teaching, I've always had open book exams, right?
Mm.
Now it's becoming a little bit more people talk about it and so on. At that time, all my senior people, they were totally aghast at the idea that you can open book in the exam. And today you can connect to Google Guru. I have nothing against it because when you solve a problem in real life, nobody
Mm.
asks you to shut your book and solve it.
Mm.
The intelligence is not about about be able to read and understand a book or to
Yeah.
memorize, right? The
Mm.
intelligence is about understand what the problem is. what are
Understand
the
the concept.
what are the dimensions of that problem? What kind of information and knowledge would I need to solve that problem? That is
Mm.
non-trivial, right?
Mm.
And in fact, it so happens that when you have open book exams, everybody is so happy, say, hey, we don't need to read anything, we don't need to learn anything, we'll open book and do it.
Mm.
The first time they would take exam of that kind, the whole class, all these bright IIT people, right, they will get 10% average in that exam
Mm.
because those are the questions which are related to common sense. They are not related to, pattern recognition through equations. In fact, it'd be so hilarious if I were to tell you this experience. I give this problem in, let's say, in some engineering course. My wife, who has a background in political science, could give the right answer to this problem, right? You can, everybody can. Okay, I guarantee you that. But this whole class of bright IITians, they get 20% average in that exam. When I tell them the answer to that question, they all feel cheated. They say, no, no, we are used to complexity, right?
Mm.
We are not used to simple thinking. You see, this is a whole problem. So
तो
so
वो थ्री
while
इडियट्स मूवी थी ना, थ्री इडियट्स मूवी वो मशीन
I
की
have not
डेफिनेशन
seen
बहुत बुकिश.
I have not seen that movie, but I could as well create it. By the way, I have not seen a movie, Bollywood movie in a theater after Khalnayak. Okay, it was
You
such a
should see
bad
this थ्री
experience.
इडियट्स. उसमें
Yeah,
आईआईटीएंस का ही है. हाँ,
right.
so from
No, no,
IIT.
it is true because common sense is not common
Yeah.
at all. You see, that's the whole point is you cannot go out there and solve, world's problems if
Uh,
so what happened in our education is about what we call pattern recognition. I call it pattern recognition, which
mm.
means from the coaching classes and everything, I see a problem, I immediately try to fit it in a mold that I already know,
Mm.
right? And because all those molds have been taught to them because of the pattern of the exams and so on, so people think this is what is going to come in the exams and I can recognize the problem, right? But
Mm.
once you go outside the mold, then
Mm.
people are totally lost. They say, yeah, what is this, right? Okay, so this is very important that what I call common sense has to be injected very strongly in education. And make no mistakes about it. Exams have to be open book. It is just no point carrying all that trash in my little head all the time, right? When I need it, I should be able to understand what I need and I
Yeah.
should be able to get to the right source to learn it and I should have the capacity to learn it in a short time. This is the meaning of education. Meaning
And
of
that is what is
education,
wisdom.
right? This is the
Yeah.
only meaning of education. There's nothing else out there. Let me tell you
So,
very frankly.
yeah. So if I thank you once again, sir, and I would now like to invite Mr. Harish Chandra ji, the Executive Director and the Editor of Indian Achievers Forum and CSR Times, to propose a formal vote of thanks as we express our thanks to all our eminent speakers for sharing their views, their perspective on NEP and also on what education should be. Yeah. So, Mr. Harish Chandra.
Well, it was a very great session, Vimmi ji. So on behalf of Indian Achievers Forum, I would like to thank all the eminent panelists for sharing their views on NEP 2020 and enlightening us on the road ahead. So I hope all the stakeholders of the education fraternity must have got valuable insights from this session. So we will keep on doing such sessions in future. And for now, I think please allow me to conclude today's session. Once again, thank you all for joining us. So see you soon. So thank you very much.
So once again, thank you to all the participants, all the eminent speakers, and as was mentioned by Harish ji, that we'll continue to have these conversations and dialogues on the key sectors which impact the social and economic health of our economy, inviting the views of the think tanks, the experts, the policymakers. So we look forward to your active participation in our coming webinars also. And as we have Diwali just 3 days ahead. So wishing you all a very happy Diwali. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a healthy, green, happy celebrations. With that, this is your host, Vimmi Choudhary, signing off. Thank you.